Welcome to the Modern Husbands podcast, where any combination of Dr. Bruce Ross, Christian Sherrill, and Brian Page host national experts who share winning ideas to manage money and the home as a team. I'm Brian Page, founder of Modern Husbands. Sometimes our listeners want more support than a podcast can give, individual or couple support, which I now provide. Details can be found at modernhusbands.com, or you can email me at brian@modernhusbands.com. For today's podcast, we welcome Elizabeth Earnshaw, one of today's most trusted relationship teachers. Elizabeth is a licensed marriage and family therapist and clinical fellow of the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy. She also founded A Better Life Therapy, where she sees couples in her tailored weekend intensives. Today, we're going to discuss her new book, Till Stress Do Us Part. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us, Elizabeth. So we want to first start talking about stress. So can you walk us through some of the types of stress that we face and how those types of stress can affect our relationships with our partners and with ourselves?
I like to break it into two kind of broad categories. And then obviously there's a lot of different types of stressors that fall into those broad categories. So there's what I call external stressors. These are the stressors that are related to outside of your relationship. So you have a difficult conversation with your boss. You are arguing with your dad. You are in traffic, for a long period of time. The cable company makes you sit on the phone line for an hour. Like, those are things that are happening to you regardless of your relationship, and they're causing you stress. You feel tension because of those things. There's also internal stressors. So these are stressors that are caused within the relationship. So this is a stress that I'm feeling with my partner because of something between us. It might be something like, I feel like my partner's really withdrawn. Like, what's going on? I come home at the end of the day. I had a good day, but they don't want to give me a hug. And now I'm feeling distress about that. Or maybe we can't agree on something. My partner thinks that when my son doesn't eat dinner, this is a real example, when my son refuses to eat dinner, that we don't make anything else. He's like, nope, if he doesn't eat, he's not going to starve himself. He's going to go to bed. And I'm like, I don't mind. I could give him a bowl of cereal. It's not a big deal. And we're fine with that. But some couples might get into an argument over the things that they see differently, they disagree on, and that can cause stress. So people in relationships have within their home external and internal stressors that are kind of like mixing in a soup together and impacting how they feel individually and impacting the relationship.
I got a piece of advice from, of all people, my landlord, like years ago. And she said, ostensibly, she was trying to make sure that, we were the kind of couple, me and Chelsea, who, would take good care of the apartment. And she always would remind us, if you have a stressful day at work, if you have some of those external stressors going on, boss being a jerk or whatever, don't impose those on your partner.
She gave you good advice.
Yeah. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah. So what's really important is that we even have that awareness, right? That the reason we're feeling stressed is because of the thing that happened at work. And if you have that awareness, then it is important to say, I know I'm bringing this home. It's not as simple as saying I'm not bringing this home. You're the person going home and you feel these things. But I have awareness enough that I'm going to work on making sure that the impact on my household is minimal with this stress. That doesn't mean that you're squashing it and holding it in. But what it means is that you don't come in hot and say, oh, I had a horrible day, or you don't come in and ignore everybody, but you're able to say, I had a tough day. I'm kind of not feeling like myself. Can I take a break? The issue that I think people, they run into trouble is that most of us, we're like living in this stress soup. We don't know like which ingredient is throwing us over the edge. And so I think the average person would say, I don't want to bring home my bad conversation to my partner. Like, I don't want to come home and take it out on my wife or take it out on my husband or whatever. But they do, because when we go outside of what's called our window of tolerance, when we have too much stress going on, it spills over and we can't regulate it anymore. We have something called self-regulation depletion. And so we come in the door and we're not like, oh, my boss was a jerk and I'm going to take it out on you. We come in the door and we're just completely dysregulated. And that's where a lot of problems can start.
I got to say, after 22 years of marriage, unfortunately, I learned this as it pertains to our own relationship, this lesson too late, or not too late, but much later than I wish I would have. And that's that my wife, obviously she loves me. And so if she thinks that something's off, the first thing she thinks is, did I do something wrong? Mm. And I had never thought that through. So I eventually just, if I had a bad day, I would just say, man, if I seem tense or stressed or whatever, literally it has nothing to do with you whatsoever. And I would tell my kids that same thing. Like, I don't want to talk about it. I just don't want you to think you've done something wrong. And just so they don't feel like that they are doing something wrong to hurt me. That was, and I feel so bad not learning that lesson earlier, because I think about all the times that they thought that they might have done something wrong. And I don't want them to go through that anguish.
That tool that you're using is actually something I teach couples to use. So really powerful. I tell people that it's narrating your experience.
Okay.
So we often just behave from our experience. We don't tell anybody what's going on. So we had a bad day at work and we walk in, and I mean, I'm a human being, so I have these days too. I walk in and my son is immediately like, Mommy, can we do an art project? Yeah. And I'm like, can you just leave me alone? What he's experiencing is just my behavior.
Yep.
Pushing me away. Mm-hmm. She doesn't want me. If I walk in the door and I want to say, just leave me alone. But what I say instead is, oh, it's so good to see you, but I had the worst day. Yep. I right now am probably going to be a little bit distant. I'm probably going to tell you guys, like, leave me alone. Like, actually, instead of saying leave me alone, saying something like, I'm probably going to tell you guys, leave me alone. That in itself is really powerful, because then everyone in the household is like, oh, I know what's happening inside. I don't have to figure out your behaviors. And so that's what you were doing. You were coming home and you were narrating what was happening inside that might cause you to be grouchy or distant or whatever happens to you, Brian. I don't know what happens to you when you're stressed.
Okay. No, that's great to hear. Thank you. Makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah, you're a pro.
Yeah. Plus the great news, Brian, is that the three of the rest of us that are on this call have never done anything like that. So we're like pretty much perfect in every way.
We're perfect.
Yeah. I've realized that I just need to give myself a quote unquote timeout. Like, if I'm feeling that way, so I will express, like, I just had a shitty day. I'm frustrated. I just need to just sit here. And I have like a special chair that I go and just sit in another room and just kind of like replenish my energy. And then I'm good to like go on about the evening.
That's amazing that you do that.
It took a while for me to realize I needed to do that. Like, in just like 10, 15 minutes can like really recharge me. Mm-hmm. And at first there was like, well, why aren't you doing that on like the, 30-minute drive home? I was like, because that's even more frustrating with all the traffic and all the terrible drivers out there.
I'm imagining, as a Kentucky guy, that special chair includes a little bit of bourbon neat.
It very well might.
You got your routine. You have a way that you know that you can rely on to unwind at the end of the day.
I know you talk about this concept of mental load. So can you kind of walk us through what mental load is and how a disparity in marriage leads to issues, really?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things to run a family and a household. There's physical work and there's mental work. They both exist and they will always exist. The idea of mental load itself, it isn't bad. It's not something we want to get rid of. It's when it's inequitable. So for anybody listening who doesn't know what mental load is, you probably know physical load. So you know that dishes need to physically come out of the dishwasher and go in the cabinets. You know that the lawn needs to be cut. You know the laundry needs to be carried downstairs. Those are physical things. But to have those things happen and a lot of other things happen in the house, there's also mental work. And so this is usually pretty invisible. And it's not the literal carrying the laundry downstairs. It's knowing I've got to carry this laundry downstairs now, because if we don't put it in tonight, then we won't have uniform pants for the morning for the kids. And also, before I can carry it down, I know I have to go down and empty everything that's already there. I have to find another laundry basket because I don't have one to take the dryer stuff out. And I have to remember to ask somebody to go get new dryer sheets or new laundry detergent. So mental load is having to remember things, research things, delegate things in your household. Mental load falls mostly on women in relationships, and this is not usually a conscious thing. I work with so many couples, and I have really met maybe like one jerk who really knew about the mental load and didn't care. Most men they actually don't see it. They're like blind to it. And so they haven't been socialized. I talk about this a lot in my sessions. At a young age, women are socialized to see all of these things, even in their play. You know, women are playing, and this might be changing now, right, with the things that kids play with. But in our generation, girls were playing with family type things. They were playing with their baby doll. They were baking with their mom. They were doing these things. And so they were learning not only the physical task of how do you put the baked good in the oven, but they were also learning when they wanted to make brownies, they were hearing from their mom, well, before we make the brownies, we have to have the dish, and we're going to have to go to the store to get that dish. But we can't do that until daddy's home to watch your siblings. So I'm going to have to ask him to come home early. So there's a lot of socialization in that. And there's almost a lack of awareness on both ends over who sees all of this at first. And then what happens is that as a relationship gets more stressful, then the awareness becomes heightened, often for the woman. And it does not become as heightened for the husband, because the husband is kind of living as he was. And so the woman who is now maybe navigating kids, or careers have gotten more, stressful, or they've gotten a bigger house and there's more to do, or a grandmother has gotten sick, any of these things happen, that's when you'll start to hear the resentment coming through. So at first, the partner might say, this stuff never bothered me in the past. I didn't mind being the one to remember when it was somebody's birthday and running and getting the card. I just do it. It's easy for me. But now I'm exhausted by it. I'm frustrated and I'm resentful because I'm remembering everything and we have more to remember now. And I feel like you're not taking some of it with me.
Elizabeth, this is timely. I posted last week. I'd written up the ultimate guide to the mental load, and I posted that with a list of just 100 examples of the mental load in a home. And this speaks to how much it weighs on the stress that predominantly women are facing. And I want to make sure that I point this out. Every guy that I talk to wants to be great for their spouse. Like, and nobody, as a guy, nobody likes to hear like you're doing a crappy job. Like, we all hate that. I hate that. But sometimes we just don't know exactly how to move forward. And I know, Christian and Dr. Ross are going to ask you questions on how to do that. But just to give you perspective from that LinkedIn post, I've got 32,000 views, 29 reposts, and 53 comments that are literally women just over the top thankful that this is being recognized, because in the modern world, 40% of households have a female who is making the same, if not more, than their husbands, and they're working long hours. They have big jobs, just like Christian's wife, Dr. Ross's partner, and they need to help. And men want to help. That's the thing. We want to help. And that's why we're having these conversations. We want to be great. So anyhow, I'm really thankful that you brought that up and that it's going to be addressed today.
Yeah. And Brian, I think it's also just, it's the realization. It's doing so much more than just like doing the laundry. It's more than just going and get groceries. Like there is a whole background in the works.
You got it.
Yes, there's so much background that I think sometimes it's even hard to fully express. And that's where a lot of communication breakdown can happen, because I will have couples who are trying to work on this, and the male partner will really want to work on it. They'll say, I don't want you to suffer. I respect you. I know how hard you work. Like, what's going on? And, the female partner might say something like, but I just don't understand. Like, I come home, I do all of these things, and like, you've taken out the garbage. Like, what is happening here? And the male partner is like, but I thought you wanted me to take out the garbage and I did it.
Yeah.
And I'm confused about what's going on. And then they'll accidentally say dismissive things that they don't realize are dismissive. Like, I think you're thinking too much about this, or maybe you just need to relax, or at the house. I remember, I will always, my husband and I still talk about this. I remember we had just had our first baby, and my husband and I, the house was clean at that point. We had gotten things where they needed to go. He's like watching TV. And I walk into the living room, and the dog has thrown up all over the floor. And he's watching TV, and I'm like on my hands and knees scrubbing the floor that I had just scrubbed. And I said to my husband, we need a house cleaner. I can't do this anymore. Like, this is just, but it wasn't just the moment of cleaning the vomit. In my head, I'm thinking about, is the dog sick? Now I'm going to have to call the vet. I don't get to sit down because I'm going to have to go throw this into the laundry. And he's sitting there watching TV. And in his head, he's thinking, well, you told me you wanted us to do teamwork today and clean the house. We did it. It's done. What's your attitude about? And I was having an attitude. But in my head, I'm thinking the job isn't done because it's never done, because I don't trust you're thinking about this too. I don't trust that I could throw this cloth on the floor and that after we watch TV, you're going to walk it to the washing machine. I don't trust that I can just sit down and you've already thought that we have to call the vet. I know I'm going to have to be the one to either remember to do that or delegate it to you. And then he turned around to me and he said, babe, the house is always so clean and everything is taken care of. What's the big deal? And I looked at him and I said, who do you think does that? Who do you think makes the dog get to the vet, da, 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 da. And my husband is the most equitable partner. He is so loving, but he could not see all the mental stuff in my head. And for him, it was truly just, it's clean. There's nothing else we need to do. Chill out. Because he wasn't thinking those things. And I mean, that was one of the first moments where I was like, what is this? I didn't even know what mental load was, but I was like, what is happening? Because you don't understand which piece of this puzzle you're missing, that you don't understand. I can't watch TV because now I have to do 18 other things with the dog.
Well, a couple things. First, if kudos to you for being patient, because if my wife was on the floor on her hands and knees picking up vomit and I was like, what's wrong? Why do you seem stressed? She would throat punch me and rub my face in the vomit. Like,
oh, I mean, Brian, don't get me wrong. I was not patient. I was like, is something wrong in your brain? Like, what is
oh God, I'm getting scared thinking about what my wife would do to me. Now, I love how you laid out the mental load that goes with that. Like, does he need to go to the vet? How do I make sure that I want to follow up with just something that you can share with our listeners to provide a specific suggestion on how to distribute the mental load of the tasks that are needed to run a home more equitably. So I'll start this way. Do you take the responsibility of making sure everything in the home is done and tell your husband what he needs to do it? Or do you divide chores where you are owning some and he is owning some, like you would as a roommate? Like, right? Like as roommates, you would say, you take care of this, I'll take care of that. I'm not your mom, I'm not your dad. Just make sure it's done. How do you do it in your house?
So I think there's a few things that are really important before you even get to that point. Number one is in your house, you actually have to trust and believe that your partner thinks it's a real thing.
Okay.
Because I've worked with so many couples, they'll come in and you could say to them, here's the list of things. We need to divvy them up. And nothing changes because the the concept is not fully integrated, if that makes sense. So there's a concept here that the partner needs to integrate, which is it is not just taking the oil to get changed. It's having to know if I take the oil to get changed at noon, there are going to be implications to that because the kids are both awake. It's not nap time. That means my partner is going to have to get off her work meeting and da 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 da. So it's not enough just to say these are the tasks. There's some deeper kind of like awareness and mental work that has to be integrated first. Not fully, but there has to be a sense of I get the concept. I'm not going to be perfect, but I get that it's just not tasks. It's that I have to be better at seeing the picture and thinking in my head, not just acting, but thinking in my head about impact, options, decision making, and all of those types of things. So that's the first part. And this part is the biggest game changer. Like once people have a word for it and their partner is like, oh, I see that. That's when you can distribute tasks and things start to change. So after you have that buy-in, then yes, I love the fair play model. I don't know.
So do we.
Yeah. So I think that that is really concrete. And I think that it makes sense. It's like, okay, I see these things. I like the idea of if you own it, you own it. I'm not going to be responsible. So going back to my example with the dog, if I own from start to finish that when the dog gets sick, I make the phone call, that moment actually isn't as frustrating because I'm like, I don't expect you to call the vet. I'm going to call the vet and I can go do that, or I can sit here and watch TV, but I already know who's going to deal with it. Or if my husband owns the vet, I know after I wipe it up, I can, or if he wipes it up, whoever, I can sit down and I can actually chill because I trust he's got it at some point. So the ownership, looking at these tasks and saying we own them from start to finish is really effective. And then the second part of it is emotional. So how do you start to navigate the feelings you have about letting somebody else own something? And this tends to sometimes be the barrier that the woman puts up, actually. And this is a lot of work in therapy, which is I want help, but I want help the way I want help. And sometimes that can limit the help you get because you might say, I don't want a meal plan at all. And then your partner meal plans. And at the end of it, you say, I don't like what you made. You did a really bad job. I hate da 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 da. So a really important part of the fair play method is that when you start to distribute, you talk together about like, what do you agree is the lowest quality level that you could do here?
Right.
So what that might mean is we agree that like you're only going to do fast food once a week. Like that's fine. Everybody gets tired if you need to order pizza or stop at McDonald's, whatever. I'm not going to be on you about it. But we agree together that like you will at least have like a vegetable, a protein, and a grain each day. I don't care what it looks like. And then if that happens, learning to emotionally, even if like the vegetable you wish you would have had was broccoli and you're getting something else instead, being able to emotionally say, this is good enough. I'm allowing the help. It might not look or taste exactly like what I would want, but I need to allow somebody else to do some tasks. And so the three things here are integration, like, do I believe that this is a real thing? Being able to take full ownership, and then emotional. How do you deal with the emotions that arise with letting somebody else take over?
Listeners have told us that they love the ideas we share on our podcast to manage money in the home as a team, but want more help than one episode can provide. That's why I'm excited to announce On the Same Page Consulting for corporations, couples, and individuals. Visit modernhusbands.com and click Our Services at the top of the page to learn more about how I can help you or your employees manage money in the home as a team. Again, that's modernhusbands.com. Now back to the show.
Can we talk next about daily stressors?
For sure.
What daily stressors exist? How do they impact us, and how do they impact our relationships?
Yeah, so every home has different daily stressors, but I would say common ones have to do with work. So, how do we navigate getting to work, getting home from work, fitting work into our day? Dealing, if you have children, dealing with children. So, anything from getting them out the door in the morning to contacting their school to getting them to sports to dealing with things that come up out of nowhere. Somebody gets sick, they need to be picked up. And then there's daily stressors that have to do with just the tasks of life. Like, do we have everything we need? Oh my gosh, we ran out of toothpaste. What do we do about that? Or I didn't realize that my gas is nearly empty. Can I use your car instead? So there's like things that come up that we don't expect, but there's also just daily tasks of life. And these things are chronic, right? Because they're just like happening all the time. But sometimes they have higher intensity and sometimes they have lower intensity. So if we have daily stressors that we feel like we've mostly got a handle on, we have enough support, we have enough coping mechanisms, enough time in the day, it doesn't impact us too much. We all have daily stressors. This morning I had several, but I'm in a really good mood. I don't feel stressed, right? But if we have daily chronic stressors where we feel like we don't have the resources we need, the time we need, the energy we need, that's when it can actually start to impact you physiologically in a way that makes it hard to relate with others in a healthy way, in a way where you can feel connected and supportive and all of those types of things.
So we know the stress comes up, right? So how do we set healthy boundaries then to counter the stress? And how are they going to affect our relationships, I guess, if we're able to set these boundaries?
So with stress, it's going to come up no matter what. You're going to have things that you are responsible for causing, and you're going to have things that you're not responsible for causing. One of the things I talk about in my book is that there are some stressors that we've brought upon ourselves. And so those are the stressors that usually need boundaries. And those are things like, even though I'm already completely inundated, I'm overwhelmed, I have no more room, I decide I'm going to be my Boy Scout troop leader. Even though I, have too many projects, I decide I'm going to sign up for a class that I have no time for. So these are stressors that we put on ourselves. Even though my partner and I don't have any money and we're struggling financially, my mom called me and she needs money. So, I told her that we're going to cover her rent this month. Those are the types of stressors that we have because we don't have good boundaries. We have porous boundaries that are usually related more to either something we want, not that the family needs, or something that we think somebody else wants, and they're going to be mad at us. So if I say no to the Boy Scout troop this year, they're going to be so disappointed in me, and I can't handle that. Or if I say no to my mother about paying her rent, she's going to think I'm a horrible kid, and my siblings are going to be mad at me, and I don't want that. And something that's really important is that you remember that when you're in a relationship, especially a marriage where you're committed to developing a secure life with each other, that your job is to first think, how am I creating a safe bubble around my relationship? And if I'm choosing other people's comfort, my mother's comfort, the Boy Scout troop's comfort, my boss's comfort over my partner's comfort, then my boundaries are way too porous and I'm going to create stress in our relationship. And a lot of people, they don't mean to do it, right? I always say that, like, these aren't usually malicious conscious behaviors. This is usually very driven by emotional experience, historical experience in their own lives. I get in trouble by my mom if I don't say yes, or I'm scared of getting fired, or whatever it is. And at the same time, when you point out, why is it more important that your boss is happy with you than it is that your wife is happy with you? Why is it more important that your brother wasn't mad at you for saying no to the golf trip this year? But it's okay. You don't mind having to deal with coming home and having someone be mad at you. You don't want your brother to be mad at you, but you're okay with when you come home, your wife is mad at you. And we're talking about husbands on this podcast. This can go in the other direction too. Wives can do the same thing. But I think that when we're thinking about boundaries, it's really kind of simple in terms of, is this going to cause discomfort in your home? And if so, why is the comfort you're creating somewhere else more important that that's worth the risk?
Elizabeth, I've been married for 22 years, and that's some of the best advice I've ever heard.
Thank you.
Yeah, that one hits just right here.
Yeah.
For me, like prioritizing other people's comfort. It's definitely a trap that I've unwittingly walked into a number of times because of, as you put it, those porous boundaries. Yeah, so it's very poignant. What's the science behind our response to stress? Like, what is happening in our brains and, I guess, more broadly physiologically when we're responding to different stressors?
There's a lot that goes on in our bodies when we are experiencing stress. Some stress, and I don't want stress to all be thought of as bad. Actually, we need stress in order to be motivated, functional human beings. And in many ways, stress can feel good. People go to the gym because that's what you're experiencing. Your body is experiencing a challenge and you're feeling some sort of tension to overcome that challenge. And a lot of good hormones can be released because of that. The problem is that when the stress feels like it's insurmountable, then you start to go into a threatened state. And so whether you have stressors that are external, so you think you're going to be fired, your parent is sick and maybe they're dying, all of those things, or you have stressors internal, your partner's really upset with you, they disagree with you heavily on something that's important to you. Any of these things, and we're all different, so they could impact us differently, can bring us into a state of feeling threatened in our bodies. And when that happens, we start to have lots of different hormonal changes happen in our bodies, and also changes in our organs, changes in our mind. And all of these things are helping us to keep ourselves safe. So when you're thinking in a relational sense, if you feel threatened and your body goes into I'm going to keep myself safe mode, you are going to become inherently self-focused. And that's where problems start to begin in relationships. That makes sense if you're being chased by a lion. If you're being chased by a lion, you're not going to be running and then look at, somebody that you're running by and go, "Hey, I meant to ask you, how was your day today?" If you're being mugged and your friend comes up to you and says, I see that, you're being mugged right now, but do you think we could talk about our feelings? You're going to be like, are you kidding me? I have no capacity to see you or anything, right? Yeah. And so you're going to go into fight, flight, or freeze. And these things actually happen to us relationally. So we are in a disagreement. It goes against our values. We feel like we can't get anywhere with it. And so we're feeling kind of existentially threatened. Is this my life forever? Am I never going to get to travel? Or we always going to have too little money in the bank because of your poor decision making, da, 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 da. You feel this threat. Your body starts to do all of this stuff. Your heart's racing. Your muscles are tensing. Your mind changes to be more hyper-focused on the specific thing that you need to get so that you don't feel threatened, and you lose your relational skills because of that. So because you're hyper-focused, you're less likely to be curious. You have to be curious in relationships, or you don't actually end up having good conversations and getting to decisions that feel good for both people. But if you're under a lot of stress, you're less curious. You're not going to ask questions and be as open to hearing what somebody has to say. If your body and mind are under stress, you are going to be less affectionate. Again, affection doesn't usually make sense in a threatening situation. So you're not going to say, "You know what? I know that we don't agree, but give me a hug." these are things that really help us in disagreements. When I'm sure any of you can think your best disagreements have been when you've been able to say things like, I disagree with you, but I totally want to hear what you say. Or, hey, I know that we're not on the same page, but I love you. Give me a kiss. Another thing that goes out the window is humor. People stop being able to respond and use humor. So one thing that will happen is if one person doesn't feel flooded, it's called flooded when you get to that point, they might use humor. My husband is so good at using humor. And if I'm flooded, what am I going to say in a threatened state? That humor is not helping me. I'm going to say, you're not taking me seriously. I can't believe you would joke about this. But
this is all just a big joke.
All of this is funny to you. If I wasn't flooded, though, and we were in disagreement, I would be able to laugh, and then we would actually probably have a productive conversation. And so when we get in this stress state, this is a physiological experience, and it's not a cognitive experience where somebody's just saying, I don't want to be funny with you, or I want to be difficult, or I want to be shut down and ignore what you have to say. Their body is actually going through something that is not allowing them to be that relational person. One of the things I do in the therapy room with people is actually hook them up to a pulse oximeter, because when their heart rate gets to 100 beats per minute, it means that they're internally flooded. And that helps their partner to see your behavior right now that I've been saying is bad behavior is actually because something's happening in your body. And that in itself can be huge, because then they can say, all right, we have to deal with that. I'm not going to point fingers and say you're a jerk, or, you don't care, you're distant. I'm going to say you must be overwhelmed. I can see that. There's something showing me that on your finger. And because of that, let's deal with that first.
Elizabeth, the wisdom behind that is striking for me, because I often think about the early stages of dating whoever your partner is now. And for most of us, not all of us, but for most of us, that's also a point in our lives where everything is much more simple. We don't have the types of stress that are going to be distracting when we're getting to know one another. But when you're 5 and 10, 15 years into marriage, that's when you're oftentimes working longer hours trying to move up the ladder. That's when you have multiple kids who need to go in multiple directions, and your household feels like another business you have to manage together, not like a place of joy. And you have to, unlike when you were dating and that spark was driving your intimacy toward one another, you have to take a pause and remember that you have to actually work at that spark, at finding those moments of love and joy with one another, because you're so hyper focused on managing the stress of your life. And I feel like that's a common theme that we see with busy dual career couples. And it's a reminder that there's usually nothing wrong with us or our marriages. What's wrong is that we're managing a very stressful circumstance together.
Exactly. And that's what people always notice. They start to notice the magical stuff. We don't even have room for it anymore. So planning the fun dates, or knowing that I love Starbursts and bringing them home at the end of the day because you can stop and get them for me, like those things aren't happening anymore. We're not decorating for holidays like we did in the beginning, or packing each other's lunches, or doing any of these like things that felt magical, not because we don't want to, but because we're so stressed that we literally don't have the time, or our bodies, our physiology is not allowing us to. We feel shut down and exhausted and unable to do these things that you might have done in those early days.
Yeah.
And sometimes people will say, but I was stressed in the beginning. There was all this horrible stuff going on and we came together. And I would say, well, yeah, but you had all of those happy hormones that were like counteracting it. So you were not having the same physiological response, because your stress hormones were there, but so was all of this amazing dopamine, and you're in love and this person is brand new and you're excited. And that goes away because life balances out at some point, and all you have then is the stress, and that can be really challenging.
I feel a little guilty right now. For those of you who are not watching this episode on our YouTube channel, Modern Husbands, the look of utter fear and on Christian and Dr. Ross's face right now, because Dr. Ross gets married next year. Christian has a baby arriving in like 3 months. I feel so bad. Like that moment of like, I know this. I know I've gone through this, Elizabeth. Elizabeth's written about it. And Dr. Ross and Christian are like, oh shit. What's gonna happen?
No, this is good for Dr. Ross and Christian, though, because what I always say, I wish that instead of Lamaze classes, people would go and talk to a perinatal therapist.
Yes.
I wish people would see a therapist who specializes in postpartum depression, and I wish that was the requirement, because the Lamaze classes,
those are so stupid. Those are such a waste of time.
Bonding experience, but they don't tend to actually result in what really happens when you're in the room having a baby. But what does happen and what can be helpful is for people to know ahead of time what to be prepared for, so they know it's normal. Because after couples have a baby, the very worst part of it is that they think the challenge they're facing is abnormal. And so then what happens is they either feel individual shame or they start to judge their partner. And so that could be judgment from, let's say, the dad saying, like, what's wrong with her? She's gotten crazy. She's, she never wants to do anything anymore. She's always nagging. And this is coming from even really well-meaning partners who are loving and supportive prior. Or it could happen from the mother who might be saying something like, my husband, he's a jerk now. I don't know what his problem is. He's always shut down. He never wants to help. And if people could in advance understand that you are going through a transition that at the very most is actually shocking and traumatic, and at the very least is stressful, and that you both are not going to be your normal selves. And I really wish people could understand that, so that when that baby comes, they could say to themselves or each other, this is not my partner's normal self. This is not them consciously choosing this. They are overwhelmed and they are having a physiological response to this change of having a baby. And so my loving husband, who used to always be around and now he's like shut down playing a video game in the basement, maybe there's some stress there. It doesn't mean it's okay to deal with it that way. No, but maybe we need help to deal with the stress instead of just thinking my partner's a jerk. Or my wife is so anxious, doesn't let anybody around anymore. We never have fun, doesn't want to have sex, da, 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 da. What's wrong with her? This is such a big change. This is causing stress to the system. So how do we unite against that stress together? And I think if people knew that in advance, there would be a lot fewer divorces after the birth of a baby, because they wouldn't be blaming each other. They would say, this is what people go through. Let's deal with it together. Let's not accuse each other, and let's get through this really hard situation.
This is very, very timely, because for the record, it's probably closer to 3 days than 3 months.
Oh my gosh, is it really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I've lost track of time, Christian.
Yeah, very, very imminent.
It's also a really sweet, cozy time. So it's not all stressful. But I just, I always say, especially to men, when I get to meet with them in advance, I say the biggest thing you can do, because when somebody gives birth, they feel they are under threat, if you remember that. So they've just gone through a medical procedure that's a risk to their life. And now they have to keep a little thing alive. And so they are in a hyper state of threat. And if they sense in any way that their partner doesn't have their back, even if prior to having is this your first child? So with the first especially, if they sense any sense at all that their partner does not have their back, then they feel even more threatened than they would have if you didn't have their back prior to the baby being born. You have more room for mistake there. And so what's so important, if I could give you one piece of advice, is if your partner says something like, I don't like the way that person, I don't like how your mother came and held the baby without asking me. Even if you're like, what? You've been like that before, like this person is fine to hold the baby. Try not to say things like that. Try to instead say, oh, why not? They tell you, great point. What can I do to make sure that I help you with that next time? Or I'm so tired, I don't think I can go to that party. I think that we need to stay home. Great, let's stay home. How can I do that for you? Because your only job is to remind this person's body that they're safe again. They're not in a medical experience anymore, and that their baby isn't going to get hurt or anything like that. And that is a huge role that you can play.
Brian, do you want to wrap us up with our classic lightning round finish at the end here?
Yeah, let's do that. So what we try to do is give you some questions where our listeners are looking for concise answers, 60 seconds or less. So I'll give you a few of those. And then at the very end, wrap it up with something simple and actionable in their lives that they can put into place right now. So what are 3 practices couples can implement in their lives today to help protect their relationship? So you have to give us 3. So it's simple to remember. It's easy. And let's try to make each of these kind of short, like 30 seconds, 60 seconds, somebody like me that can walk away and understand, hey, this is what I can do. So what are 3? Let's start with 1 practice that couples can implement in their lives today to help protect their relationship.
Having some sort of practice that you do to manage your stress individually. So what do you do to make sure your stress cycle is finishing? Kind of like Dr. Ross, I know that I need time at the end of the day, so I sit down and I do that. Somebody else might say I need to go running every day. It's my thing. So making sure you're taking care of that for yourself.
So what is a second practice couples can implement in their lives today to help protect their relationship?
Learning how to co-regulate. So being able to become someone that recognizes when another person is stressed and being able to stay grounded yourself so that you don't dysregulate the other person even more is huge, because it makes sure then that things don't snowball into huge arguments.
And what's a third practice couples can implement in their lives today to help protect their relationship?
What we talked about a little bit earlier, so being really clear about what your boundaries are. So what is it that you do and don't do with your time, your energy, your money, and why are those things important to protect your relationship?
And what is one piece of simple and actionable advice that you want to leave our listeners with today?
The most important thing that you can do in your relationship is to remember that the point of partnership is to have a united front against the world instead of being against each other. And so that is your job.
Elizabeth, final question. Where can people go to learn more about you and the book that you just released? Can you share that?
Absolutely. So my new book is called Till Stress Do Us Part. It's available everywhere books are sold. So you can order it. You can go into a bookstore, whatever you want to do to get that book. And the easiest place to find me is my website, which is my name, ElizabethEarnshaw.com, or on Instagram at LizListens.
And for our listeners, we will be sure to share those links in our show notes on a blog post and YouTube, the YouTube description. Elizabeth, it was a pleasure talking to you today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Don't leave just yet. Be sure to like and subscribe before you do. And a reminder to visit modernhusbands.com if you're looking for money and home management support in your life. Just click the Our Services button at the top of the page. Again, that's at modernhusbands.com. And many thanks to our co-hosts, our guests, and of course, all of you for joining today.